We're good. We're now live.
Okay.
Woohoo.
Good evening. At 6:04, I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Mountain View Wisman School District Board of Trustees. We'll start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'll all rise and your hand up and rise, or I don't know. I'm gonna face both Ellen and Laura's flags. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of
America and to the republic
for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you, trustees. And can I get a roll call, please?
Laura Blakely.
Jose Gutierrez Jr.
Ellen Wheeler.
Devin Conley.
And Tamara Wilson. Let the record reflect that all 5 trustees are present. And we'll move on to item 1C, approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, on a motion moved by trustee Wheeler and seconded by trustee Gutierrez, the approval of the agenda passes unanimously. We will now move on to item 2, opportunity for members of the public to address the board concerning items on the closed session agenda. Dr. Rudolph, are there any members of the public who have written or phoned in on this? I'm seeing a head shake as to no. So
hold on. Let me double check. I know we have some community comments.
okay.
Let me just make sure tonight's community comments. So we have 2, and they are more about distance learning and
Not closed session items.
yep, we have one that's on an item that's not on the agenda. And then the other 2 are about distance learning. So I would assume I would just add them to the the item where we're talking about what comes next.
Okay, so we'll be sure to circle back to those. So it looks like at 6:06, we will adjourn this meeting and go on to closed session.
Yep. So just hold on 1 second.
So we'll be back public in about an hour and a half or so. Hang tight. To the consent agenda. All items on the consent agenda are considered to be routine and will be approved in one motion. If discussion is required, items may be removed for separate consideration. Ellen Wheeler, would you have?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any
And I'd
opposed?
like to make a separate motion.
Aye.
Are you opposed?
No, I'm saying I'd like to make a separate motion.
Okay, what is, I'm not procedurally schooled in the first motion being approved and then the second
Let's
motion.
finish this one real quick so Nancy can record it.
So on a
And then
motion
we'll-
moved by trustee Wheeler and seconded by trustee Blakely, the consent agenda is approved unanimously. And then it sounds like we have a second motion from
I
trustee Wheeler.
do. Since we know that tonight's meeting is going to run long anyway, I'd like to make a motion right now so that everyone knows about it, to approve the end time being midnight tonight instead of 10 p.m.
I'll second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, on a motion moved by trustee Wheeler and seconded by trustee Wilson, the motion to extend the meeting until midnight tonight passes unanimously. So we will move on now to communications from employee organizations. Are there any members of employee organizations on the phone or on email who would wish to address the trustees at this time?
No, I have one comment that I'll do for items at community comments.
Okay, and then so we'll move on now then to district committees. Anyone wishing to reach to the board at that time? Okay,
I've got a quick one.
okay, trustee Gutierrez.
Okay, so just a friendly reminder that we've got a DLAC meeting coming up next week, and everyone should have received an email already. Un recordatorio de que vamos a tener una junta de DLAC la semana entrante y todos que son miembros para ahorita ya deben de haber recibido su invitación. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Gutierrez. So we'll move on now to communications from Superintendent, Dr. Rudolph.
So good evening, everyone. One of the things I want to talk about just real quick, we've submitted our paperwork to the county. So we will start on Monday doing evening meals also. So Rev is going to provide them and we will include them with the packs. And then also with that, we will do weekend feedings. So on our Friday packs of food, we will also provide breakfast, lunch, and dinner for the weekend too. The final thing I would say is that we will also make sure that there's a parent from Huff who also wants to donate food on the weekends on his own. And so we will make sure that we also are providing those. Or giving them the opportunity to do it. We're really excited to be passing out more meals. And we're really looking forward to this opportunity to continue to feed the students. We're averaging about 2,500 meals a day. And, you know, obviously I've been checking in on CSA. They have lines out the door. Second Harvest has lines out the door. So it's a good thing that Hope's Corner, so all of us are sort of coordinating and working together to sort of get through. Another good thing, I spoke with Debbie this afternoon. She does feel good about where we are. We have a meat supplier who has transitioned from offering food to restaurants and is now offering food to schools. And so we feel really good that we have a stable meat supply that will take us into the summer. And as you know, you may not know this, but we ran out of milk earlier. Trustee Conley went around and helped to find a couple milk providers so that we can continue providing milk, and we're able to get that. But we are going to see some shortages every so often, just because of all the meat packing places that are going to shut down because of this.
Thank you, Dr. Rudolph, for the update. I didn't see whose hand went first, so I'll go to the bottom of my screen. I've got Trustee Gutierrez.
Okay, thank you. Actually, Ellen's hand was first.
Oh, sorry.
I have a question for Superintendent Rudolph. There's been some publicity that you're going to do like a virtual superintendent's coffee or something like that. And the communication I've seen about it says to link to the district website. But when I looked at the district website, I didn't see how to, I didn't see any notice of that superintendent.
Shelley, you want to talk about what the process is?
Sure. So right there on the homepage, there's connecting with the community. And that is a page that lists all the different virtual meetings and opportunities we have with the community coming up. So it's listed on that page. And then there's a link you can just click on to register for whichever event of your choosing. And you'll receive an email that then gives you all the login information for the event.
Good. Thank you. Jose, your turn.
Yeah, thank you. So wait, where's the end? Question was for him.
I think he can still hear you.
I can hear. Sorry, the AC's not on in the office, so I need to turn it on.
Okay, so here's my question for you. So you were mentioning that there's like 2,500 meals that we're serving now a day. Does that mean that it correlates to 2,500 students who are receiving food?
So 2,500, it's K through 8, birth to 18. So, you know, all I can say is we're handing out 2,500. Some of those students, because we're committed to feeding anyone who's up to the age of 18, some of them may not be our students, but we're still committed to it. We also are providing food, about 300 meals to Los Altos, and we're also providing another 300 to Mountain View, Los Altos. So it's a little bit higher than that, but for the most part, 2,500 meals a day.
And are those two of the school districts pitching in with, or they just get, I mean, how does that work?
So they're reimbursing us for the food as well as the labor costs.
And then one final question, for our McKinney-Vento kids, how are we handling that? Are we going out there to give them food, or are they participating to pick up food, or how does that look like?
So Priscilla is connecting with them. I did see today, and I forget the name of the street, but it's where all the RVs are. That's right along Rain Store. So I just went down there today, and there is and I forget the name right now. There's a group that is actually providing them with boxes, and they're dropping that off. And then obviously they have the opportunity to come down the street to get more food. But we are, at least for the McKinney-Vento students that we know of, we are touching base to make sure that they have food, and then we'll get the meals out. I will say the preschool, that is the city's preschool worker, identified maybe 50 families and felt like it was easier. This is the one that's on, that's over on Rainstorf. And she noted it would be easier for them to get food out if it was down there than it would be to have families come. So anytime we know of an organization that's doing something, we'll give the food out to get it closer to where people are. But I think between us, CSA, Hope's Corner, the organization I saw today, and a couple other places, I feel pretty good. Not good that we're meeting all the needs, but I feel pretty good that we're pretty saturated. What Debbie told me today is that she is starting to see more and more people show up, and they're coming from all walks of life. Her comment to me was, where you're seeing a car that costs $80,000 or $90,000 pull into the lot asking for a meal, that sort of shows you the extent of how leveraged some people are at this point, because they're not open. So it's definitely something that we take a lot of pride in, making sure that we're providing food. And I'll be out there again tomorrow, just checking in on things to see how things are going. The other thing I do want to say is our hotspots are showing up. And we prioritize those to go to our homeless kids first. And then we're giving them out to a couple others. We do have, we're working on some solutions, a couple staff members who don't have internet, but that's a totally different thing. Our priority obviously is to the students who are without across the board.
Thank you.
Devin?
I heard from Simitian's office that there has been, someone had approached them about us possibly expanding our sites. They were talking about a family near Landals, but I don't know if we're, as we see that the need is increasing, are we considering expanding to another site for distribution closer to the east side of the city?
So unfortunately, if we want to get reimbursed at 100%, we have to keep it at the Castro site. And we just have to get pretty creative about how we get meals out. So Los Altos picks up from the Castro site. The preschool picks up from the Castro site. Mountain View Los Altos picks up from the Castro Mistral site, because that's where the qualification is. So I think maybe, because I want to say you can use the school's boundaries, which would mean that the furthest we could get to is Rainstorf Park. But I think our challenge is, if we know who they are, we can always engage the SCEFs to get meals out there. We have a pretty good crew of 20+ people who want to make sure they get fed. And even the food truck, as it drives, I was behind it today, as it's driving over to Castro Mistral. Sometimes we accidentally make a wrong turn somewhere. So I think anything is possible if we know about the need.
So families should really reach out to their principal and their SCEF if they need help with food and they're having trouble getting to the site.
Yep, definitely.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from trustees? Okay, thank you, Dr. Rudolph. So we'll move on now to items 7, community comments. This is the time reserved for community members to address the board on items that are not on the agenda. The board and administration welcome this opportunity to listen. However, in compliance with the Brown Act, the board is not permitted to take action on non-agenda items. Dr. Rudolph, do we have any speakers or comment cards for this item?
Yep, I do have one item, and I'm going to assume the second one is for distance learning.
Okay.
So I'm gonna lump those two when we talk about reopening, if you
Okay.
don't mind. Or I can do. I mean, technically, distance. Well, let me do it this way. Distance learning technically is not on the agenda because we're talking about reopening. So how about I read all three of these comments so that they're in the record and not try to assume.
And are there any members on the phone? I see a phone number popping up. There may be some.
Yep, we have one person who has just called in. So if you want to let them go, I just come in to the meeting.
I don't know what they're commenting on, so I'm happy to let them address us and let us know what that item is.
Nope, hold on one
They're
second.
live and on the phone, rather than
We're
wait.
not. I haven't admitted them into the meeting yet.
Do we know what they would like to address? Is it an agendized or non-agendized?
I do not know because they're on the phone, so it's not. I can't message them or anything. I just have to let them in. But I'm the one who controls.
I would let them in. Let's find out, and then we can make a determination. Hello, sir or madam. You're online with the school board.
Yes.
Are you here to address an item that is not currently on the agenda?
Hello, my name is Sean Decter. I'm the union president. I missed my chance to speak under employee organizations. I was wondering if I may be able to speak now.
Absolutely, please.
No.
Thank you. I had a little bit of trouble logging in.
No worries. Thanks for calling in and being persistent, and we appreciate it. Please, you have.
First off, I just want to say thank you for approving our most recent tentative agreement and ratifications. We look forward to continue our negotiations with the Mountain View School District. Our negotiations continue to be collaborative and positive for the students, teachers, and the Mountain View community. I would like to also sunshine the following articles for the next round of negotiations for the 2020-2021 school year. Article 3, hours. Article 5, compensation and benefits. And Article 7, class size. Going into this next round of negotiations, we're looking to retain our highly qualified teachers, entice newly qualified teachers into our district, and improve working conditions to benefit all student learning. Today, I also wanted to speak on one more topic. The teachers at Mistral Elementary have reached out to me about next year grade level assignments. The teachers would like to share a letter that they wrote to their principal, Tabitha Miller. Members of Gabriella Mistral Elementary faculty would like to share our thoughts and concerns about the proposed teaching assignments and changes for the next 2020-2021 school year. We fully maintain the administration's right to change teaching assignments in order to meet the needs of our students. However, in the light of the current COVID-19 emergency, we ask that the administration work to minimize further disruption to student learning that will be caused by multiple changes to teaching assignments directly affecting 4 whole student grade levels at Mistral. We were notified via email on Thursday, April 2nd, 2020, that 40% of the Mistral teachers are to teach a new grade level in the fall of 2021. We are extremely concerned by the great number of teachers required to move grade levels during such times of uncertainty, when our students need now more is stability. We are already concerned that our students will start the next school year with a more significant learning gap due to the sudden and unforeseen need to adopt to distance learning. Many students will be assigned a teacher that has not previously taught their new grade level or the student's previous grade level. Teachers affected by a change in assignment will need to learn their newly assigned grade level curriculum and the curriculum of a grade level in order to close that larger than average summer slide students experience in a typical year. Absent a global pandemic, our teachers would normally adapt to this challenge by meeting with their future teams, passing along teaching materials to each other. However, the current situation has made teacher collaboration extra challenging. Brand new teams of teachers will need to meet and plan new grade level curricula by next fall, amid the COVID-19 crisis that serves an extra impediment to crafting quality lessons and units for our students. Some teams are changing 1 or 2/3 of their team. Some teams will have never worked with each other in the past, and at least one grade level team will consist entirely of teachers that have never before taught that grade level. The state and county shelter-in-place orders will not allow teachers to meet in person in order to prepare them for next year or for the new year. Our teaching teams have made strides towards integrating technology in the classroom, especially with our current distant learning methods. But our teachers will be unable to pass along many of the physical classroom materials that we will use to teach our students or to plan together for the new year through meaningful collaboration. When teachers prepare to teach a new grade level, it often means purchasing new teaching materials. The types of books, posters, and manipulatives used in the classroom are obviously very different in 5th grade compared to what one would use in a 2nd grade classroom. The shelter-in-place order means that purchasing these materials is not recommended. The businesses where much of these materials are purchased are closed, and online purchasing is severely backlogged and ill-advised, given the priority for delivery of medical supplies to hospitals. We understand that we will eventually be able to go back to our classrooms and hope that it'll be sooner rather than later. But the change in teacher assignments will create a greater disruption in the fall. At the end of this year, teachers may be unable to properly pack up their current classrooms and pass along materials to new teachers. They may not be able to set up their new fall classroom properly. Teachers whose assignments have changed for the fall will require more time to set up their new grade level classroom when students do not return to campus. When students do return to campus, I apologize. If teachers are able to keep their current teaching assignment for the 2021 school year, student learning will be more easily facilitated by a smoother return to campus. Our students and their families are experiencing the brunt of this crisis. Financial struggles, missing their friends, and emotional separation. We would like for them to come back to the least possible change. They deserve to go back to school with a teacher that is in complete control of the curriculum and learning expectations. If the fall begins with distance learning, it would be best if their teachers are not also learning the curriculum for the first time. Maintaining the grade level teams as they are for one more year will help students feel right back at home when they finally are allowed back on campus. We urge that you consider your plan to reassign 7 teachers into new teams. The timing is just not right. Given the current state of emergency, we are focused on adapting to new distant learning expectations and finishing the year strong. Adding the task of learning a new grade level on top of what we are already learning in order to deliver online lessons will in the long run hurt the quality of our teaching and the educational outcomes for all our kids next year. With respect, 15 out of the 18 Gabriella Mistral Elementary School staff members. And I just would like to end with, I hope you take into consideration the Mistral teachers' concerns for next year. And I really appreciate and thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you. Are there other members of the public, Dr. Rudolph, on email or on the phone?
No. And I assume that you just wanted Sean to, because he normally would have unmonitored time for his comments. I assume that it was okay to allow him to extend beyond what we traditionally afford.
It was, and we generally allow questions. So I don't know if anyone on these kinds of items, if we are circling back to item 6A. No questions? Okay.
Okay. All right, so I'll just read in the record. We have 3 comments. First one is from Larissa Palika Engel. Dear trustees, as you consider the plan for next year and the continued need for distance learning, please know that the current tools and solutions are not serving the needs of all MVWSD children, and that a plan needs to be put in place to accommodate children with disabilities and those who are neuroatypical. My son is struggling. If next year plan relies on Google Classroom, Zoom, Khan Academy, iReady, and a solely technological-based approach to learning, he will fail. My son has ADHD. These learning methods are not suited to the way that he processes information and the way that he learns. The dashboards are confusing and impossible for him to navigate. Video and Zoom are not tools he feels comfortable using, and most video progresses too slowly for his race car fast brain. Learning has ground to a standstill in our house. While I appreciate all the effort that has gone into the district's distance learning plan, It is time to start proactively reaching out to kids like my son to see how this is working for them and obtaining feedback to help plan for next year when all this may be graded. He has a 504, but we have not had proactive outreach from the district asking how we are progressing. We have made our own outreach and have settled on a bare minimum for him to complete. However, it is still not working. So again, I'd like to reiterate that you please consider all children as you think about next year. Thank you. Comment number 2 comes, my name is Sarah Colbert Olson, and I'm the PTA president at Mistral Elementary School. It is a pleasure for me during this Teacher Appreciation Week to speak up for our beloved Mistral teachers, whom we trust, honor, and respect deeply. Their well-being directly translates into the ability to serve our students well. I would like to express my sincere concern for what appears to be a school culture that has bred, for majority of the teachers and many parents, a fear of retaliation for speaking up or disagreeing with school administration. As the district plan calls for all working relationships to be constructive, positive, and begin and end with the student in mind, and because the Mistral site plan aims to ensure that 80% of staff feel heard or considered in this decision-making, I respectfully ask for you to ensure that Mistral teachers' interests are properly represented and protected. Thank you for your service to our community. Last one is from an anonymous parent. Thank you for addressing the school reopening in August. I want to thank you for presenting a school reopening plan for August. My child is a Graham student and is very much struggling with distance learning. My child is having trouble staying engaged and loses focus easily, much to my dismay. My child is smart, but seems to really need in-person instruction. I'm trying to help my child with schedules and plans, but I myself work, so I can't be a homeschool teacher. I understand that there are many aspects to reopening. That's why I believe planning for reopening as soon as possible is critical in order to be successful. I also believe announcing those plans to parents as soon as possible is equally as critical. Thank you for your hard work educating our kids. And that is the last community comment that I have.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Burdoff. Since there are no more community comments, we will move on to item 8, review and action, starting with item A, elementary social studies curriculum adoption. Ms.
Good
Victor.
evening. Yes, thank you. Good evening. So on April 2nd, information about the elementary social studies and science adoption process was presented for review and discussion. A recommendation for adopting Teacher Curriculum Institute, TCI, History Alive was also presented, and that presentation is attached. Tonight, I would like to recommend that the board approve the adoption of TCI History Alive for elementary social studies beginning in the 2020-21 school year.
Are there trustee questions? Trustee Conley? You're muted.
Yep, sorry, I was taking care of it. Thank
No
you.
worries.
So I had a question about, I know that tonight we're looking at history social studies. When we're looking at piloting science in the fall, will we still be able to do that if we are in a virtual setting?
I actually am working with the team right now, and we'll have some updates about social studies very soon to come, or about science, I'm sorry, very soon to come. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Other questions from trustees?
I move that the board approves the adoption of Teachers Curriculum Institute, TCI, History Alive for elementary social studies beginning in the 2020-21 school year.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and a motion moved by trustee Blakely and seconded by trustee Gutierrez. The motion passes unanimously. We're going to move on now to item, thank you, Ms. Vickier. We're going to move now to item B, designation of applicant's agent resolution for non-state agencies.
So this resolution would allow us to get reimbursement from FEMA for costs related to COVID-19.
Are there any questions from trustees?
I just want to point out to trustees real quick that we are applying for the expedited process, which will get us 50% of the 75%, so 37.5 reimbursement for all expenses. And then we can always go after the other 37.5 a little bit later. But Dr. Westover and I both felt it was important to get in before FEMA runs out of money, considering that a lot of individuals are going to be able to apply for it, and we just don't want to wait until they redefine their process and we're left with a bill that won't get reimbursed.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from trustees? Okay, do I have a motion?
Public comments?
Oh, public comment, sorry. Are there members of the public who wish to address the board on this item?
We have no one in here for public comments. If somebody logs in, I will let you know. But as it stands right now, if you don't hear from me, just keep on rolling.
Okay. Any additional comments from trustees? Okay, may I have a motion?
I make a motion that the Board of Trustees approve the designation of applicant's agent resolution for non-state agencies as presented.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, and a motion moved by trustee Conley and seconded by trustee Wheeler. The motion passes unanimously. We will move on now to item 8C, approve amendment number 1 to master development agreement for the ground lease and design, construction, and management of district employee housing project with Mountain View Owner LLC.
So this is just an amendment as we work through the leases and design. We informed them that we wanted to wait until after Measure T passed, and then they have a couple of delays on their end. And so it's just an extension of what we've already agreed to. We're giving each other more time than what we need, but we felt like if we say to the end of the year, it covers all our bases, so we won't have to bring this back.
Okay. Additional questions from trustees? And members of the public? I'll assume, unless you say otherwise, that is not the case. How about comments from trustees? All right, do I have a motion?
Sure. I move that the Board of Trustees approve amendment number 1 to the development agreement with Fort Bay, extending the closing date to December 31st, 2020.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
I have a, is it Fort Bay or is it Miramar Capital?
They're both the same.
It's Mountain View Owner LLC.
But now they changed the name to Mountain View Owner LLC, but Fort Bay, Miramar, and Mountain View LLC are all the same company.
So the motion would still apply?
Yeah, it is for this this amendment. So yes.
Okay. So all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, and a motion moved by trustee Gutierrez and seconded by trustee Conley. The motion passes unanimously. We'll move on now to item D, the tentative agreement with the California School Employees Association.
Good evening, trustees. The district representatives and CSCA bargaining team, we met during the school year to negotiate a bargaining agreement. We've come to the board with a tentative agreement, and the highlights are as follows. The agreement is from July 1st, 2019 through June 30th, 2022, the CBA. We would like to amend Article 21.2 to reflect that requests to reopen shall be received by no later than October 1st. So we'll be coming to you in the fall with reopeners for the next this coming school year. There's a salary increase of 3% effective retroactively July 1st, 2019. In addition, unit members shall receive a one-time off-schedule payment of $1,300 less applicable taxes and deductions. The gross sum amount is equivalent to 2.5%, with 287 eligible unit members, including 6 retirees. So we are asking that the Board of Trustees approve the tentative agreement between the Mountain View Wisman School District and the California School Employees Association as presented.
Thank you, Ms. Geisels. Are there any questions by trustees? No members of the public, and any additional trustee comments? Trustee Conley?
I wanted to just kind of point something out for the public, which I think can be a little bit confusing. It might appear that the trustees don't discuss the contracts when we are in our public sessions, but for the sanctity of the negotiation process, we actually discuss the contracts throughout the negotiation process, but in our closed sessions. And so, you know, I understand transparency, but then I also understand the needs and requests of our workforce in negotiating these contracts in confidence. But I'd like the public to know that we have been talking about these for a very long time.
Yes.
Trustee Gutierrez?
Yes, I'd like to just call out and thank that, make people in the community understand that also part of this is that effective July 1st, 2020, employees who have earned either an AA degree or a BA degree are also getting a stipend. And I appreciate that recognition and effort and the reward that we're giving them as well on that front. So thank you, Alan.
Thank you, everyone, for your work on this. Do I, at this time, have a motion?
I make a motion to approve the tentative agreement between the Mountain View Wisdom School District and the California School Employees Association as presented.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The motion moved by Trustee Conley and seconded by Trustee Wheeler. The motion passes unanimously. Congratulations. We now move on to item E, resolution number 01050720 to establish a fund for Measure T funds.
So this resolution would allow us to open a fund to put Measure T funds into once they arrive.
All right, thank you, Dr. Westover. Are there any questions from trustees? Trustee Gutierrez.
How soon will we receive the funds?
Hopefully before June 30th.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Public comment? Okay, additional comments from trustees.
Thank you, voters. Thank you so much to the voters for your support. I know a lot of districts had measures that didn't pass, and we're so grateful to the residents of Mountain View that live in the Mountain View Wisconsin School District boundaries for your support for our district and your confidence. And so thank you.
Yeah, I'll second that. It was a resounding success at near 70%. So that's unheard of, I think, in the region. So thank you to our community for your continued trust.
And Laura, you should make the motion.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'd love to. I move that the Board of Trustees approve resolution number 01-050720 to establish a fund for Measure T funds.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and a motion made by Trustee Blakely and seconded by Trustee Wheeler. The resolution passes unanimously. And we'll move on now to item 9 under review and discussion. 9A, the Bond Oversight Committee report.
All right, I'm going to try to move quickly because I know that we have a long meeting tonight. Okay. So Measure G, Bond Oversight Committee. So according to our strategic plan, we try to have good resource stewardship and maintain our facilities in good repair. So this is a summary of where we were at with Measure G, zeroing out almost all of the funds. Right now, we are really wrapping down our Measure G projects. Here's a summary by site. You'll notice there are some balances left. We have the Landell's play structure that we're still continuing. But these are projects that we are finishing up, but the majority of the funds have all been spent. So ongoing projects, Landell's and Stevenson Field drainage and curb work. And this week, the playground arrived at Landell's, so this next week they'll be putting it in. Just a quick look at some of the projects that were completed under Measure G and the COP. And I think we've ended with some beautiful buildings and facilities that everyone will enjoy using for many years to come. We also have our Vargas projects and a picture of Vargas for you. So this was the very fast version.
Thank you, Dr. Westover.
Sure.
Do we have questions from board members? All right. Nothing from the public? Any additional comments?
Good job.
Wonderful. Okay.
I have one quick comment.
Trustee Gutierrez?
I'll be quick. I just want to thank everyone who supported voting for Measure G. I know at first, when I first joined the board, it was a little contentious in terms of, having buy-in from the community, thinking that maybe not all school sites would receive funds for some sort of improvement, but we worked through that together as a team, and we passed several improvements on all the sites. And I'd like to thank the public for trusting us with that process, because we were promoting that we were all in this together, and I'm happy to have been part of this process with Ellen and with the prior board, along with this one as well. So thank you everyone for your trust and support.
Thank you, Trustee Gutierrez. Trustee Wheeler?
No, Trustee.
Oh, sorry, Trustee Blakely.
I just wanted to thank the members serving on the committee. I've been the board observer for the last couple of years, and those meetings can be, not the most scintillating. And so I really appreciate all of the members for, regularly, doggedly attending and asking questions and helping the district out with that function. So thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Blakely. Any other comments from trustees? Okay, we'll move on now then to item B, Parcel Tax Oversight Committee report. Dr. Westover.
Sure. Okay. So I'm going to run you quickly through the Parcel Tax Oversight Committee that met for the first time during this COVID shelter in place. So according to our strategic plan, we need to make sure that we keep our various resources up to date for our students. So this was the purpose of Measure B had a 191 per parcel tax, and it was approved in 2017, and listed are the things that it is intended to help with and support. For the programs that help fund after school enrichment, each site received funds for the enrichment-based needs of the schools, and programs included chorus, STEAM, creative writing, and each school is able to customize their enrichment activities. Square Panda is a phonemic awareness program for which focuses on kinder and first grade, physical education for 1st through 5th grade with PE teachers. It also funds at-risk individuals are at-risk facilitators who help monitor students who need additional support and connect them with the different supports that they need. It also funds our art and music program through CSMA, our middle school counselors and CHAC, and help support our support staff and custodians. And this is a breakdown of how the funds are spent. And also a thank you to the members that were on the Measure B Parcel Tax Oversight Committee. Okay, that was as fast as I could go. I think you're on mute, Tamara.
My latest talent is the read my lips version. All day on Zoom, I'm like, don't forget to unmute. Thank you for your presentation. It was fast, but you covered all the main points. I was going to ask if any trustees had questions. And seeing as there are none, any comments from trustees on this? I'll just say thank you for your work and for facilitating those meetings. I know, and to the committees for serving on both the parcel tax and the bond oversight committees. We appreciate your service.
You're here.
So with that, we'll move on, I believe, to item C, communication plan under COVID-19. Shelley.
All right, so give me a second. I'm going to share my screen, and I have Shelley Hausman, our Public Information Officer, with me. Let's hope this is the right presentation.
We'll find out.
Yes, we will. Shelley, is this it?
As far as I can tell.
All right, well, it says May 4th, so maybe that was me late at night, missing
All
up the day.
right, I'll check while you start.
Okay. So just want to talk a little bit about communications. This came up in the board retreat in October, and so, or not October, in April. And so we wanted to discuss how we're approaching communications and sort of its adaptations since then. So the first thing is our strategic plan under goal 3 requires for us to make sure that we find ways to make community members feel valued. But really, it requires for us to provide clear and positive communication to all students, staff, and families and community members. More importantly, it drills down and says that we will have consistent expectations for internal, external communications, a lot of the work that Shelley does. It also will provide professional development to all staff on expectations, which again, Ms. Hausman does. And then it also will sort of create a common approach for communication and information sharing internally as well as externally, which is, there's been some adaptations that we've made as a result of this, and I want to bring those up. So the first thing is we actually create a lot of algorithms. These algorithms help us to understand how to think through problems. And oftentimes what we do is when we have something really work, we then turn back around and say, well, how did that actually take place and what is it that we need to do? So for this one, for the most part, when we decide to roll out communication, we often start with the board of trustees and then we go through a series of meetings till we get to the actual execution and then eventually the evaluation. I'm gonna take you step by step and I'm gonna use a case that we just had just recently. So originally the board said that they wanted us to work on an implementation plan or a plan of action for how we were going to do the census. And so that became the driving force for us. And stage 2 was for us to interpret what that direction actually means. And that was for us to use district resources to communicate the importance of the census to all constituents, especially vulnerable families. So then we started thinking about who our target stakeholders are, as well as the way that we would communicate with them, because every family that we interact with communicates a little bit differently. We wanted to make sure that we had targeted methods for communication from there. After that, the next stage is for us to actually study the topic to understand what we're really up against. And so we brought in Raymond Mueller, who worked for the census. He actually came to a board meeting. We also looked at what other districts were doing, and then we reviewed the census toolkit that was also sent out. We then determined a direction as a result of this, which is stage 5. And what we notice is that the district, each of its departments and sites will take a lead on disseminating information. And then we identified who are the individuals that actually need to get trained. Principals, staff, secretaries, and clerks became our frontline employees. But we also wanted to make sure our teachers were aware of it too, but we knew that these were the people who would most likely interact with someone asking questions about the census. From there, we gathered stakeholder input. So we set up professional development meetings for directors, staffs, administrators, secretaries, and clerks. And we gathered feedback about what they needed in order to communicate this particular action item that was set by the board. We then started working after you go through all these stages, we start working on how we craft a central message. And we felt that it was critical that everyone fills out the census, which I know we've had a very high turnout in Mountain View, which is really good, because obviously it helps to determine funding. So that was our central message. And then the second part of our central message was under Title 13, no information will be shared with the government. We came back and we did one-on-one meetings to talk about what we were doing behind the scenes. And that allowed me to collect informal feedback and sort of from questions as well as the sort of path check. Then we started identifying the audience. So we came back to actual board meeting. Board gave additional input, targeted at-risk populations, and sort of suggested formats for outreach. And then we went to DAC, DLAC, MVF, and PTA presidents. And then we asked principals to follow a similar approach with communicating with site councils, ELAC, and PTA groups. Then we started getting feedback on the actual plan. So we wanted to make sure that we got enough feedback before we move forward. Stage 11 and 12 is sort of a revision of the process and training of the actual staff for communication. which is when we bring the final items to LT. We review all the presentations. We address any questions that principals had. And then we also perform what's called a toss-up drill, which is us practicing. And then finally, we've finalized and redefined staff needs for execution. And so we released the packet to all stakeholders, we distributed materials, and reviewed our media package. And then we determined the cadence of media messages across the board. And then finally, we brought back Raymond Mueller at the 13th. And that was the last board meeting. And that's also when the trustees passed a resolution. And then from there, we go through an execution and evaluation stage to make sure that this message is actually is actually working. And what we also use are these informal meetings also to sort of talk about it. And that's where one of the things that we started realizing about our process. Hold on one second. Okay, sorry. So here's some things that we have to take into account. The algorithm, which was developed this year, enables us to create success in terms of unified messages. And part of the reason why it's successful is that it has multiple check-in points with various stakeholders all throughout the process. The other thing is that board direction feedback guides the development of the actual plan of action. But there's a thing that we have to understand that is missing under COVID-19, which is simply that most of the communications that we rely on are actually face-to-face communications. And that gives us that creates a bigger feedback loop for us than it does when we send out messages left and right. We get some responses, but we get more feedback through the face-to-face activities. So we need to reestablish parent and stakeholder feedback loops that existed under the traditional format and sort of adapt those to our new situation. And finally, we want to recognize and appreciate, so these are the goals under COVID. We also need to thank parents and community members who have become integral partners during this time. Specifically, parents who are spending a lot of time serving as teachers at home. And so these become the three key points of our communication. So there are some key messages here. We want to talk about how we're supporting kids. We want to talk about how parents are being engaged and supported. We want to understand how staff members are being supported. We want to talk about highlights of distance learning plan and aspects of COVID-19, its impact on the district as well as the community as a whole. As we did an assessment of where we are, what we also noticed is that it's not about producing more information. We actually pump out in our LCAP survey says we are sending out a lot of information as it is. But it is about the increased frequency of key messages and consistent delivery is important. But we also need to deliver information from the inside out, meaning that we want internal stakeholders informed and helping them understand their roles in communication. So for instance, as I start talking about what we're going to do next, what you'll also hear me talk about is how we have asked the principals to mirror some of the same things that are taking place at the site, because what the LCAP survey has said over the last couple of years, the sites are actually the most integral part of the communication approach, and that they get most of their information from principals and sites, which is why we go out to different sites during the year. And they get some information from the district office, but they focus more on what their principals are saying. The other piece here is that we need to understand that there's so much coming at us right now that we have to break information into bite-sized bits for parents, as opposed to dumping a lot of information on them. And then we need to figure out, we're testing these methods to make sure that it is suited for each audience. So for instance, I have a Cafecito coming up. We have DLAC, which is coming up. We're going to see how well Zoom works. And if it doesn't, then we'll have to readjust. And we've actually, as we've been working on this, we've actually tested out 3 different platforms in order to try a coffee tomorrow and settled on Zoom as our current approach. So what are we doing? So we looked at each method we used before March 13th and created its online equivalent and added new aspects. And then we also realize that at the end of the day, we have to leverage technology to create interaction and get feedback. And so we're gonna rely on Zoom to get some of this done. So the first thing is, I know this calendar is overwhelming, and I have to thank Nancy for doing it. But really, what this says is like how the amount of check-ins and meetings that take place on my schedule. So this is actually what my schedule looks like. And what you can see is today we have a board meeting. Tomorrow I have a community check-in. It also doesn't include the district office meeting that's going to take place tomorrow too. So this gives you an overview of what it actually looks like. We've blocked out Saturdays and Sundays primarily because right now we normally would have a Saturday with the superintendent in there. But because we can't do large gatherings, we sort of pause those. But you can see just across the board in terms of the amount of meetings that I have scheduled to do some outreach. And then the other thing I want to highlight is we brought back superintendent school coffees. So we have, but we grouped them because we don't have much time until the end of the year. So we grouped them by sort of demographics. So what you'll see is we're going to start off with Crittenden and Graham first. The principals have actually coordinated some of their items they want to cover. And then all three of us will sort of talk, but we felt like talking about promotions and placements was a very important thing at Crittenden and Graham, and sort of reminding them about scheduling, the scheduling stuff. So we'll work through each school, and then eventually we go back to our normal cadence, which is we'll meet I go to a school every other week and hold a coffee there. All right, so our adaptation. So we want to continue to release information, but we also, we want to be creative in some of the visual information that we give. So we are sending out weekly newsletters, infographics, notes with lunch distribution. We're using School Messenger, which allows us not only to send voice messages, but it also allows us to text to those parents that have signed up for it. It allows us to do emails to staff. We have the dashboards on the school websites. We've created new webpage sections. We also have created a coronavirus website or page, as well as a distance learning page for parents to keep them informed. We are going to continue to use some innovative tools. So we will rely more on videos, social media posts. Our social media, I'll let Shelley talk about it, has really spiked. Shelley, do you want to address any of that? Is that in the presentation?
That's actually coming up. I think the next slide.
Next slide. Okay, I couldn't remember if we added that. Signs around the community, as well as we want to make sure that we are now starting to send out a tip of the day. And so we're putting that on a regular cadence, so how we can help families. But we also, we want to make sure there's also an emphasis on our employees and making sure that they are staying safe and taking care of themselves too. One of the things that I'm starting to see is an uptick of the amount of work that people are doing because our days are all blending together. And so we want to make sure that we're focusing in and finding out what's working for our employees. What are some of their concerns? And I'll talk about that in the next presentation I come to too. So what are we noticing from February to April? So April is the blue, and what you can see is the number of fans has increased a little bit, but the number of engagements has increased drastically since February, and the number of posts that we have done has also increased too, which allows us to get more information out. What we also are noticing is that videos tend to be the most effective approach of engagement, and so we continue to use videos as a way to reach out to families. And so, one of the things I'll say, is that we'll continue to refine our approaches as we get feedback. And this is both quantitative and qualitative data. But at the end of the day, like, this doesn't change the fact that face-to-face meetings are the preferred method for us. And so we have to find ways of communicating with families on an ongoing basis, which is why we're going to do the coffee tomorrow, and we've asked people to sign up for those. We do want to admit that there's a changing landscape that's evolving, and we're trying to do as much as we can without putting too much information in it. Content creation can be very time consuming, and we don't want the creation of content to overtake the need to get information out. So I do have a couple questions for the trustees. The board indicated that it would like to have meetings during the summer. And in order to plan appropriately, is the intent to have regular board meetings, retreats, or study sessions, or any of the combinations? My suggestion is, just based off of reviewing the notes, is that we add a meeting to next year's governance calendar for the end of June. And then we add one for another meeting to the governance calendar for next year at the beginning of August. But, you know, I wanted to use this time after talking with President Wilson to make sure that we understood what the intent of the board meetings are, and sort of what you wanted to approach, because each one of these meetings is a little bit different. Obviously, a retreat is focused on what's going to happen in the future, or if the intent of these meetings is really to talk about what we're doing in terms of reopening.
Thank you, Dr. Rudolph. So it sounds to me like you have a question as to whether the board is amenable to 2 additional meetings added to the governance calendar, one in the end of June and one at the beginning of August, and what the nature of those 2 meetings would be. Are they regular board meetings to identify, you know, where we're at as, again, the situation evolves? We're not sure where we will be or what we will be, which scenario will be facing us. So is that the intent of your question? Is this is 2-part, like, yes, are those 2 additional dates acceptable, and what are the nature of the meetings? Is that correct?
Yes, and then obviously any, also if there's any feedback in terms of how we present a communication that you have that you want us to take into account, we'll take that too.
Let's start there with this the communication strategy, and we'll open it up for questions from trustees. Trustee Gutierrez?
Hey, thank you, Madam President. So if we can go back to the presentation at slide number 20, please. Anyone? Awesome.
Yep.
One more? Yeah, there we go. One question for you, Superintendent, just in terms of equity, because I'm sure there's going to be people that are asking the question. When you look at where the arrow is right now, or not, that's my arrow. When you look at the superintendent's school coffee twice a month at 9:30 a.m., you have schools listed, but what happened to Castro and Mistral and?
Oh, you can't see. It's just because of the size of the document. I cut off the top and the bottom. So Castro, Mistral, Montaloma, Therkoff, Castro, Mistral, actually all a part of the June 23rd meeting. You just can't see it because it extends further than what the slide would allow.
Okay, thank you. That's my question.
Trustee Wheeler.
Yeah, I had a question. It's one of the slides further along. What do you mean by engagements?
Engagements in social media are anytime someone interacts with a post. So they like it, or they send it to a friend, or comment on it. So that's considered a higher metric because they're not just passively reading it, but they're actually engaging with it.
Okay. So is that positive and negative?
I guess you could look at that way, but I would definitely say that is positive, because I think anytime you can engage with your community, even if it's on a topic that's, you know, uncomfortable, it's still an engagement that produces feedback that will inform our communications.
And I have a more general question, and you know, I appreciate the comparison or the lesson from the census work. Did you get a sense at the end that a lot more people were engaged or participating in the census work than at the beginning?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Shelley, you want to take it or you want me?
I was going to say that I don't think it's just coincidental that Mountain View has one of the highest response rates. I think it's 66%, because we put a lot of time and effort into making sure our staff members had the information they needed to allow people to feel comfortable with the census. And we consistently communicated about it over many weeks. And actually just last week, we communicated again about it. So I'm sure that there's a correlation there.
And I would just say these algorithms, I think we're up to like 7 or 8 now. And you'll see another one coming up, but these algorithms actually are built off of successful campaigns, right? And so we spend time deconstructing it. This is actually an adaptation of an original one, which came from healthcare, and switching it over. And then as we work on these, we actually build them out a little bit further. And so this one became district-wide communication. There's another one, which is multiple stakeholders. But these, I would say, you know, going through these, while it can be a little bit time consuming, allows us to really study a topic in an abstract way. The second thing I will say is that when we fail, we benchmark this against incidences where we fail. And it's easy to point out where we made a misstep, which is normally something that we thought we were doing, but we sort of went through that phase a little bit faster. And so now this sort of acts as a way to slow us down, to make sure that we're doing these things on a more intentional effort. Trustee
Blakely?
I have a question about the videos. You said that those are the most engaging, or you have the best hit rate, or I don't remember what the wording was, but that they were the most effective.
Yes.
And at our last meeting, we acknowledged that you've been doing a lot of communication. And I'm just wondering, do we have the resources to push those out? I'm not necessarily in favor of hiring more staff, but if those are the most effective, is there ways to outsource a little more? Like do you have the resources you need to push the videos out that you need to push out?
Like Dr. Rudolph said, content creation is actually very time consuming. So when I'm looking at what we need to communicate, I prioritize those things. So for instance, the food service was very important, that the community understood what was happening there. And so I just devoted some time and effort to that. I actually took the video for that. And then we had a contractor put it together. So I guess the short answer is we could always use more resources, because more resources means more content. But I think as long as we prioritize and make sure that we are, you know, working on the projects that have high value to our community, we'll be okay. But certainly we can always create more.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you're prioritizing them that way. They are resource intensive, but
yeah,
I'm glad they're effective. So thank you.
Oh yeah, you're welcome.
So I have a question. I'm curious if you've asked our principals to maintain their content in their newsletters, because I know we talked about the timing of communications. There were times I was seeing things as a parent myself at 7 a.m. on a Monday while I might be on a conference call that was outlining my entire kid's week. And it was causing a lot of stress. I know that has changed, but what about the content in newsletters? I'm not sure if the public's aware, but as trustees, we see each newsletter from each school site, and I've seen some continued continuity, and I've definitely seen some content drop off. And I know that's not Shelley's job to create that content, but I'm wondering why I'm seeing that and these very personalized messages, when I think now is the time for principals to be talking to their communities at that level more than any other time.
So we've addressed both of those items. We've talked about modeling the behavior that we want to see that we want principals to see, and what we want teachers to do. So principals are working on, and actually in some of the ones I've seen, they've been stepping up. We've also moved our weekly post up, our dashboard release up, so that it doesn't come out on Mondays anymore, but it moves to Fridays, which gives parents the opportunity to sort of plan their week, as opposed to getting it on Monday, which is you may be in the middle of a meeting and it becomes a little bit hard to sort of get your kid going up and going. So that came directly from the feedback that we heard, not only from the board, but also from family members. But we have talked with principals about the need to add more personal information in there and sort of just check in. And then obviously we've been working on that ourselves by making sure that we add more stuff. But I'll point out, for us, most people just want us to pump out a lot of information about what's taking place in the district. and they actually expect more of a personal message from their site because that's just the nature of it. And so what we try to do, we try to repeat a lot of the messaging, but on a different level once it gets to the site. And Shelley does help the principals in terms of teasing that information out and getting it out to parents.
Yeah, I guess my comment is just I've seen at certain sites the initial principal message that's in every newsletter has dramatically diminished. I was just wondering why that was the case. I don't think now's the time for that to occur.
No, I think that's just a matter of, principals, most of the stuff they derive is based off of the face-to-face interactions that they get. And so when it's easy to talk about school when, school's in session, and our principals have really committed to making sure that they are going to post personal things and talk the same way the teachers are, we miss the kids and here's some things to talk about. And I think, there's a lot more information coming out. So there's you have promotions, ceremonies that they'll be talking about. You'll have math placement that they're going to be talking about. So you should see an uptick on this moving into the end of June.
Okay, Trustee Conley.
Yes, I have really appreciated. So our teachers have become content creators, right? Like they could all be YouTube stars. They're doing amazing work. Every week when I log in with my son, I'm really blown away with the content they're doing. And then they're having office hours 4 days a week where anyone, and like my teacher, for example, is doing that via Zoom. So anyone can just log on and talk to her from our class. I've seen some of the principals already have a Facebook presence and have done videos on Facebook consistently and are still doing so. And I think that's a wonderful vehicle. I'd love to see, I know we're moving towards the principal cafecitos and cafes, which is also a great step. But there's not that face-to-face interaction with the principals right now that we have at the level of the teachers. And I don't think a principal can do office hours every day. But I'm wondering if there are some further opportunities for our principals to be content creators. Because by going through the process themselves, they're also more able to support their teachers in doing it as well. And I know it's really meaningful to the community when they're able to see our school staff members in person.
Mm-hmm. So I know that multiple principals are listening to you right now. And we have another LT, so I can definitely bring that up with them. And you're right, they are at varying levels. And so they could even help each other with what they want to do next.
I'm going to give a shout out to Principal Taylor, to Principal Galassi, to Principal Tager, because I have seen them consistently. And there may be others I'm missing, and I apologize if I am, but like I watch those videos on Facebook. I really appreciate that they're there, or the content that they're posting on a regular basis.
Trustee Gutierrez.
I have a question going back to the governance calendar. So I'm thinking that for the end of this year, if we weren't to need the meeting, but we approve it anyways, how does that work?
So, and one of the reasons, and I'll just be honest because it's going to come up a little bit later, we're actually strategically hoping that you choose June and August, because that also enables the board to provide feedback about the reopening plan. And for this to serve as another vehicle to say, the board is taking this seriously, here's what we're doing. And by then, by the end of June, we would have narrowed it down to a couple of options, and the board can sort of weigh in on if we have to do a partial reopening. This is what, this is sort of where we're thinking, not to give ultimate direction, but to at least say, have you thought about this, this, and this? And I don't think these are going to be long meetings unless the board is saying you want these to be study sessions and you want to really dive into a particular topic. But I think, at any time, if we choose not to meet, we just choose not to meet. But I think for these two meetings, it's going to be really important because it's going to be the end of the year. Parents want to know what's coming up. And then the next one's going to come before the start of the school year, which reminds parents what's going to happen. And by then, we'll be a little bit closer to, the start of the school year. And we can reaffirm, here's our approach, this is what we're doing. And, in the event that public health says you're ready to go, full stage 1 reopening, boom, we're running with this. And we know exactly what that looks like.
Okay, that helps me to understand the question more. So thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Trustee Blakely?
So in that vein, when I was advocating scheduling some more meetings over the summer as necessary, it's exactly for the, it's really only if they were needed. And it sounds like I had not envisioned study sessions or special meetings, but just meetings, if they were going to be helpful to the process and appropriate, that we be able to guide you. And it sounds like those 2, late June and early August, would work fine. And that's consistent with what my intent was.
Yeah, what the beauty of when we mapped out the schedule and we looked at the time frame, we really felt like if we could not meet the June 14th deadline and set up focus groups and task force and get feedback and do it right, which is really what part of the direction that the board gave. So we felt like, but we could get very close to having some options by the end of June. And then we can spend the month of July finalizing those options, making orders, and being ready to go on day 1, and then bring back and say, this is what it's going to look like. So we just, I took the liberty of interpreting what the board's intent was. And a lot of back and forth with Trustee Wilson about like, are we sure this is what we want to do? How does this look? And she was very upfront about some of the expectations. But we really felt like this would really help us. But it also allowed, again, I think, when we look at the communications framework, we need that back and forth to know that we're on the right path, which means we have to bring it back to you. Otherwise, what ends up happening is we interpret it one way, and then we get down the road and we realize like this wasn't really the intent of where the board wanted us to go.
Trustee Conley?
And I just wanted to add, I'm fine with moving to the end of June and early August meetings. But if something drastic comes up in July, or something about summer school or changes from public health or whatever, we can always schedule an emergency meeting at that time and address that issue.
Yeah, I think that's always on the table as a special meeting. So this was just to really be given the situation and do our due diligence to ensure that the community knew that they were going to be getting updates and when, because there's just so much uncertainty. I just think it's better to cover our bases. Trustee Wheeler?
Yeah, I just wanted to put my thumbs up for the 2 meetings that Dr. Rudolph was describing.
Okay. Any other feedback on the items or on the communication strategy? Trustee Blakely?
Well, and I would just say to Jose's point, if for some reason you shouldn't need those meetings, I mean, there's no problem in canceling them, but I think it's good to do the placeholder and go ahead and plan.
Right. Perfect. Trustee Gutierrez?
One last comment. So Shelley, just please, if you need help, you guys know, right? Because this is a lot of work, and it's too much for 2 people or 1 person alone too, but still.
Thank you. I appreciate that. This is definitely a new time, but it's a challenge too, a fun one in addition.
Thank you for all your help.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Shelley. All right. If there are any comments from the public on this item or additional comments from trustees? Okay, we will move on now to item D then, math placement 2020-2021.
All right, and please bear with me as I share my screen. Hopefully that worked. Okay, are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Yes. Perfect. Okay, so I would like to discuss with you our middle school math pathways for the year. And of course, this presentation aligns with Strategic Plan Goal 1, providing every student with preparation for high school and 21st century citizenship. As you know, we have 3 different pathways in our middle schools. All of our students enter 6th grade, either on the point 1 path, which takes them through algebra at the end of 8th grade, or our point 2 path, which takes them through geometry at the end of 8th grade, both of which are accelerated. And then when they move into 7th grade and on through 8th grade, we have 3 paths. There's the grade level path, that point 1 path to algebra, and the point 2 path to geometry. And I want to highlight that all 3 of these paths lead children into high school on an A to G track. And so the important piece to remember is that these pathways are really designed to meet the needs of all students. We know that children learn math at different rates and at different paces and have different needs. And we want to make sure that we provide that math instruction where every child needs it most, so that they really can enter high school ready to be truly successful. There is flexibility for students to move in and out of those pathways at the end of each year based on their performance and their strengths and their needs. And so children can move up a pathway or move back, and that is absolutely fine based on whatever works best for them. We do have the double periods of math for the students in our most accelerated pathway because they are completing 5 years of math in 3, and 2 of those are high school years. And while response to intervention is not technically part of the math pathways, we do have the intervention courses to support students who need to fill gaps in their math knowledge. And so placement, of course, is really important as we think about what pathway our students are going to be on. Last year, the following data was used to make those placement decisions for middle school math. If you'll recall, we started with the use of the end of year iReady diagnostic assessment. We coupled that with our state assessment results in math. And then we really checked our mid-year district benchmarks to make sure that the placement was appropriate. And we did align our course placements with those of our neighboring district in Los Altos. And so we had the same expectations for state tests and iReady diagnostic assessments. We had a process and a plan for the development of an actual math pathway that was going to follow our students, beginning with the kids who are in 6th grade now, and would adjust every year until at the end of 3 years, we have a full math placement policy for all students in grades 6 through 8. And so we began this year with clear cut points for students entering 6th grade. Those were shared with parents at the beginning of the year. And then as we reviewed data throughout this year, we were able to determine cut points for 7th grade, and those will also be shared with our families who are moving into 7th grade this year. And we'll continue our work on the development of that math placement policy for our students to be complete through the entire middle school. And this is really important because the appropriate placement is really critical in preparing our students for success, and that really is our goal with everything that we're doing here. And so, of course, after we developed this new math placement last year, we have school closures this year. And with school closure, we had suspension of state and district testing. And so we do not have any of those end of year assessments to place students. And so tentative placements will be determined with some beginning and mid-year cut points. These will only apply for the upcoming school year, and then we will go back to the more traditional placement policy. And so we will be using tentative placements now just to be able to plan for middle school schedules. And tentative placements for students moving from 5th into 6th grade would be a diagnostic score of 500 at the beginning of the year and a diagnostic score from December of 515 or above. And then any student who does not meet those 2 criteria would be placed into 6.1, which is also an accelerated pathway. When we look at students moving from 6th grade into 7th, we have to really think about cut points. Students in point 2 will move along the next logical pathway. So our students in 6.2 will move directly into 7.2. But the kids who were in 6.1 have 2 different pathways that they can go to. And so we will use the cut point of 495 or above to continue in 7.1. Anyone in a 494 or below would then be able to go on to that grade level course of 7.0. And then our students from 7th grade moving into 8th grade will continue right along that next logical pathway tentatively. So students in 7.0 will be in 8.0 and so on and so forth. It's really important that we support students in this transition, especially at this time that we're in distance learning and not having the in-person support every day. And so we really want to provide students with opportunities to prepare over the summer and really jump into the new school year as prepared as they can be. And so our teachers at the middle school have been very selective of some grade level and module specific lessons in Khan Academy that would really support students in solidifying their knowledge and being ready to move in to that middle school class. Some of the teachers are also recommending some iReady lessons that kids can do over the summer. And we're going to be working on preparing some options for students who don't have access to internet at home so they can download some of those Khan Academy lessons. If they go to pick up lunch and they have internet access in the parking lot, it's a great place to do that. And we'll be providing some alternative options for kids who really need some additional support and access to. And then when school resumes in August, we will have a new iReady assessment that will be administered to all students, and the data from that will be used to confirm placement. This will allow students to be able to move up a pathway. So for the kids who were in 6.1 who didn't quite meet that cut point for the next pathway, this beginning of the year test will allow for that to happen. We know that a lot can change from December to the end of the year or the beginning of the new year. And so we want to be able to make sure that we adjust for that. We also want to be sure that we can adjust for students who maybe haven't been able to engage as much in online learning and need to adjust a pathway to have better support. And so with all of that, we will send information to families so they're very clear about what that cut point looks like. That communication will go out next week, and so that we can provide supports and information about all of the different things that are happening and be really clear. With the math placement timeline, I just want to be clear that I've been working with the middle school administrators and the middle school math department chairs since February to plan and process all of this, and really have been trying to be clear with our communication. The one change I want to make is that communication to families will go next week because I'd like to update some of the resources and supports that are available. And next steps, of course, will be to continue that communication. I know Dr. Rudolph and principals will be talking about it at their parent coffees, and we want to be really clear and transparent with everyone. Also working on the learning gap plan. We know that there will be some different needs from our students coming back into the school year. And so we're really working to revise some of our pacing and planning. And then we want to be able to provide as much support as we can over the summer to help kids who are accessing those lessons and giving as much support as we can so that everybody can be as successful as possible in their new math courses in the coming year. And that is my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Let me unmute myself. Thank you, Ms. Fickard, and Trustee Conley, I believe your hand was up.
Yes, for the bridging activities over the summer, if we do have students who are inconsistently accessing online resources like Khan Academy, will there be some other materials available for them that might not be online?
We will be working on that. And this is part of the reason I'd like to pause a little bit on sending materials out. I will be working with our math coaches and providing some things for our parents and students that we know cannot access the online material.
Thank you.
I think Trustee Blakely, were you commenting? Oh, sorry. Are there other trustee comments or questions? Trustee Wheeler?
Yeah, have the math placements been assigned already or tentatively assigned for middle school and high school? And if they have, roughly how number-wise, how do they correlate to past years?
I don't have any data on high school, but I can tell you tentatively, based on the numbers that we have and the tentative placements, we have roughly 8 to 10% fewer kids in the 0.2 pathway this year, but that is due to change when we come back and have new assessment data. But based on our December data, it's not off by a lot, but a little bit fewer in each of those 0.2 pathways.
By high school, I meant the ones we're recommending from 8th grade, or 8th grade students going to high school.
And our 8th grade students going to high school, I have no data to share with you right now.
Trustee Gutierrez?
Hey, it's me, it's Jose. So I have a question for you. I don't mean to be nitpicky, but this presentation is for figuring out how to place students who have been out of school since March 13th. That's what I understand. But then you mentioned earlier that you had been working on this plan since February, or did I misunderstand that part?
We began talking with the math department chairs in February to really talk about math placement for next year and how to best support students. Of course, from February and through March until April, those plans have made some adjustments and turns, but the conversations about how we best support students and adjusting some of our pacing has been going on since February. So this actual tentative adjustment has not been since, has started since we've been out of school. But long time conversations have been going on, if that makes sense.
Okay. And so I see here that the assumption is that all incoming 6th graders are assumed to be on track to completing Algebra 1. Given that we may have this learning gap that we're assuming could be occurring right now before our 5th graders come into 6th grade, is there any way we could sort of predetermine based on the existing iReady results and other assessments, like which kids may already need additional supports so we can ensure they don't like slump back? We already kind of have an indicator that they may need some additional supports.
We do have some indicators on that already, and our principals are working on placing students into an intervention course in math for kids who need that extra support right off the bat. And we will continue to work and monitor along the way.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Vicure. I'm going to assume there are no questions from the public on this or comments. Are there any additional comments from trustees? Okay, thank you, Ms. Vicure.
Thank you.
We will move on now to item E, planning for reopening.
Hey, can I request a short bio break?
Absolutely.